Hi everyone, this is Rapid Diffs call March 26, and we have a first point from Patrick.
Yep. So I was looking into the impact of caching diffs on the server side. I posted some numbers and my thoughts on the issue. There's a lot of information there, so please feel free to chime in asynchronously. But the TLDR version is that based on the estimates, it can fit the current. It can fit the Redis cache cluster. So, but I'm still confirming with Bob, and based on the numbers as well, like we get more unique requests for smaller diffs for MRs or commits. So we can actually benefit if we cache smaller diffs. So that means if we cache the diffs of MRs and commits with fewer diff files. So yeah. Any initial thoughts? But yeah, not reported.
Why do we have more benefits for smaller files?
Since they're requested more, so they will be able to utilize the cache more. So instead of, let's say, a smaller MR gets requested 10 times by 10 users, then it will be 10 cache hits.
I think it's still an open question whether we want to cache small MRs, like if there are 4 or 5 files. Do we even have to do this with a new architecture? Like I'm not still sure.
Yeah, I think it depends on the. It's also part of the unknowns, like because we want to. What do you call this? We want to render the first n files, right, on page load. So if it's actually a smaller MR or a smaller commit, and we'll load everything on page load. So it will depend on the performance of that. So if it's actually fast, then we can probably skip it. But if it's like, yeah, but if we want to make it faster, it will benefit from caching, since the perceived performance would be better.
Patrick, what happens on self-hosted if we stored this amount of data in Redis? Like this would be fine for .com, but if self-hosted doesn't have a big cluster size, is it just going to break it altogether?
I mean, the eviction rate will probably go up if they don't have enough size. But it will not break. It should.
No, that's all right. No, it's fine. Just I feel like I've got bad memories from many years ago of Redis just breaking on .com because we put too much in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Patrick, do you know if we have any data for how much DB queries take in the whole request pipeline? Because it seems like our database acts as a caching service for merge request diffs. Like we generate the diffs, we store them in database. I was wondering how much of that can we actually reuse and not create a completely separate storage in Redis? Like just serve the files from the database, transform a little bit on the real side and send it back.
Yeah. I don't have the answer right now, but we have a dashboard for the current diffs patch implementation. But I can't remember if there's a specific metric there for database query time. But based on experience, the slow part in the Rails request is not only the database query, but also the rendering of diff lines, which is currently it's because of serialization, the JSON that we return on a diffs patch JSON request. But in this new architecture, it will be the rendering of HTML. Yeah, but I'll get back to you on this.
Yeah, sure. I'm just wondering, like, aren't we storing so much stuff that is basically the same in different places? Like we store highlighted diffs in database, then we just add some minor HTML to the diffs and send it back. Like, yeah. And now I have a question: what we actually should cache? Like how much diffs we should actually cache? When do we stop, or when do we start? That's a really good question. Yeah, if we have data for this, it will get us clearer to the answer. What exactly should we do?
Yeah, I mean, for highlighted diff lines, we actually store it in Redis as well. The cache, we actually cache it in Redis as well.
So it's not stored in the database.
Yeah, what we stored in the database is the diff, the git diff.
So it's plain text, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's plain text.
I see.
And then we highlight it, and then we store that, when we cache that highlighted diff line in Redis.
I see now. Okay, so now it makes sense to store it in Redis then. If we store the highlighted stuff in Redis, we just replace the highlighted stuff with the finished markup.
Yeah.
And that's it. Yeah. Okay. You have a next point?
Yep. So it's a question regarding the POCMR, because I was trying to benchmark the page load request, because it's failing on mine. So I don't know why. It's just the performance bar is not working for that specific request. So I wonder if we can rebase the POCMR and the caching MR as well. So maybe that would fix it.
I'll try to work on that, because I'm also working on bringing streaming to commits page. So yeah, it's all part of the same work.
Awesome, thank you.
Paulina, I believe you have the next point.
Yeah, so I've added a description, a more detailed description for the issue on testing accessibility. And I started thinking if we should actually do it in a way that we add the tests at the end, or maybe it would be better if I pair up with anyone working on separate issues where we get some like output I can test for accessibility and do it gradually throughout the epic. I tried a POC on the current diffs, and the problem is like the nature of the diffs, you have multiple lines and like the links on the lines. So if you get a violation for a link, that can be like 30 violations outputted, and it's sort of like a bit messy and disturbing to fix everything in the end. So I'm a little bit more to the solution that we keep that issue with the description how and what to test, but add tests like step by step and just make fixes on the way.
That's a tough question, I would say.
Yeah.
And also, I wouldn't test against POC that we have, because it is just for demos. It's not how it's going to look in the final product. I would suggest going with the current rendering of the diffs, like going to production, seeing how it works right now. Maybe using test IDs as previously suggested, because we might directly port them to the new HTML. Definitely do not use any class names.
Yes.
That is unreliable, most definitely. Yeah, test IDs, tag names, I'm not sure, really. Also, I think we have some form of storybook for Rails. I don't know how it's called.
Right.
So we have a way of rendering view components in Rails, right? We can create a view component for the div specifically, and basically run every accessibility test against that. I don't know how integrated the diffs should be with the page in order for this test to pass. Maybe like imagine we have some kind of alert that users should see when they do bad things, and that doesn't work in the view components part. Yeah, that stuff will require the full page. But for the basic stuff, like if we can use tab navigation, for example, area labels, stuff like this, we can probably use that. I just don't have any experience with the storybook, so don't take my word for granted.
Yeah, I remember something about it. That might be a good idea. We do accessibility tests on UI component, like view UI components with Storybook. So I will look into that. Maybe we can use that as well here. Thanks.
Sorry, noob question. What is a storybook?
Storybook is basically like a documentation of all your components in the project. And you can run each component in isolation. For example, we can render this div just as a single component without the whole page, right? And this allows us to perform such tests as accessibility validation, because we can isolate this component from everything outside. And it's also very good for testing just in general, like visual testing, for example. We can create this div view component. We can make a screenshot of it. Then we can render the same component in view and compare the difference, like how visually different these are. Yeah, this is how it works.
Some things.
But yeah, Paulina linked our storybook for GitLab UI. You can check it out. So we have almost all GitLab UI components there. And you can see their properties, their documentation. You can interact with them, which is really handy. Yeah. Okay. Quick note from me that Rapid Diffs MVC is created. Feel free to add something that I missed there. And also, if you have any new work for the MVC, please link it to this epic. Yeah, that's a small update from me. Last point from me as well about backend architecture, because I still don't have a clear picture of how it is going to work on the backend side. So imagine we have caching, we have streaming, and the question is, when do we do both of this? Like if we cache stuff, do we stream it? Do we send it right away because it's cache? And if we don't use streaming with caching, will there be like a completely separate pipeline to get it with streaming without any caching? So I have lots of questions like this. And I think for me to better understand it, and for everyone else, is to have just a graph, some sort of graph that goes through exact steps, like what happens during the request. Like if we request a merge request without any caching, how do we get it to the client? How do we get the first 5 files? How do we get the rest? How do we get user data? Like stuff like this. I don't think everyone has a full picture of that as well. Correct me if I'm wrong. Because it's clear when we have cache. Like if we have cache, return the cache. It's understandable. But when we don't have it, that's where I have most of my questions. And also imagine we have a merge request with 200 files. Do we return 200 files in a single request, like with the document? Because it's all cache, right? It's zero overhead almost. Or do we still continue the same path of serve a small portion, then stream the rest? These are the questions I have for now.
Yeah.
Does anyone have the same concerns?
Oh, but based on the POC, it will be like if it's cache, it will be the same thing as uncache. The difference is that if it's uncache, it will be cache and then return to the client. That's the basic explanation of it. But
So
yeah, go ahead.
we plan to keep the structure no matter like if we have the cached version or not. Like for example, as I described, a really big MR, we still serve like the 5 files or whatever we decide on, and stream the cached version on the client. Like
Yep. Yeah, so it will still be like that. And then while streaming, because we've got, I mean, right now the current POC for caching is to use template caching, right? So for streaming, it will still be streamed, but it will be the view will be fetched from the cache and then streamed back to the client.
You know what? I think it makes sense to make just another POC with caching, but without any rendering of the diff files on the server. And the reason is, if we have the cached version, we can return our merge request page really fast. Like it should be under 200, 300 milliseconds, ideally. If we can return that fast, we can start streaming right away. We can request the diff files immediately. And we don't have to handle this logic of splitting diff files in these weird chunks. Like you don't have to split it in 5 files and then the rest. We can just continuously serve all the cache at once. Yeah, I think it makes sense for now. Also, add to this template streaming in Rails, which is basically return your layout, then return your page layout. If we can figure this out, we can start streaming even faster, like almost in 100 milliseconds. And that itself will make the page fast because we don't have to render these files, then join it all together, send to the client. We serve just the layout and stream the diffs. So I'll add that to the agenda that we might need this POC. Any thoughts so far?
Yeah. I'm not sure I get it yet. So are you thinking that if it's cached, let's say an MR has 20 diff files. If all of those 20 diff files rendered HTML already cached, they would just display all of them on page load. Is that what you're thinking?
I'm thinking just removing the diff files from the document response. So it's not rendered on the initial request. It's only sent with an additional request. But it will work only if we can get our page quick enough. Like if we can get the document in under 200, 300 milliseconds, it will make sense. Because if you render these files on the server, it also adds up to the document time. Like if we have 200 milliseconds for the page, just for the page, we'll still have to add like, let's say 200 milliseconds for the diffs, for the 5 diffs files. I think even with caching. And that makes the whole page twice as slow. I'm not giving you like exact numbers, it's just like from the top of my head, but imagine this. And if removing the diffs rendering from the page gets the page really, really fast, I think it starts to make sense to render diffs in a separate request because we get some sort of like parallelism in this whole process.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same thing as what we have now, right?
It's kind of the same, but the problem is that the page takes a lot of time to render. Like
Yeah.
When we request a document on gitlab.com, it's around 600, 800 milliseconds, and we
Yes.
still don't see anything, right? If it doesn't bring any benefits, that doesn't make sense. Yeah, and we should definitely render diff files with the page. But if
Yep.
the page gets faster, yeah, it starts to make sense. And also template streaming. Without template streaming, it would be hard to get the page to return as fast as much as possible. Because template streaming basically skips the page controller, as far as I understand. It just returns a layout. It maybe triggers application controller. And we already have this HTML. And as soon as we have this HTML, we can start rendering diffs in a separate request. So definitely worth exploring. Not saying this will be the way that we handle this, but just an idea that came up.
Yep. Yeah, that's why I'm also looking to the performance of the page load requests. Because
Yeah,
I want to see like what's taking so long. Because remember last time I checked, it took like a second to load locally, just still too long. So yeah.
I did the same, but using like a kind of native profiler for the process, and 25% is coming from Puma. So it's doing some stuff behind the scenes that we don't see in the regular benchmark profiler that you click on GDK. So switching a server might help a little bit with this, but also we have lots of middlewares. Like this middleware processing consumes at least half of the time for the request, which is a huge tax on performance. And if that's the case with the merge request page, if we cannot get under 300 milliseconds, yeah, we should definitely render diffs with the page. Otherwise, it will feel insanely slow. Like, because imagine waiting like 500 milliseconds for the page, and only after that it starts streaming diffs. Yeah, people are not going to enjoy that.
Yep, I agree.
Patrick, what do you think about making a call about backend architecture? Maybe like finalizing it, how it all should work in the final result, because we have lots of graphs with the requests, but they are, I think, too generic at the point. Maybe we should just write down all the details and also all the unknowns. Like, for example, you've already checked the caching stuff. Like, we can write that down to make an assumption of some sort. So what do you think?
Yeah, and I create a graph for that. It will be based on the current views. If it changes, if we decide on a different approach, then it can change it.
Do you think we need a call for that, or we can do that async?
Yeah, I think we can do it the same.
Okay.
Or we can have a call. I can ping you on a Slack channel if you want to talk about it. But
Yeah, why not?
I would create a graph first so we can discuss something.
Cool. Thanks a lot.
Awesome.
Any more points? Okay, that's it for our Rapid Diffs call for today. Thank you everyone for joining, and have a good rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
See ya.